When are car prices ever going to drop? And why would they? Clearly, buyers are still buying vehicles, and it's the old supply and demand adage. So if people are buying cars, these car manufacturers know that the reset is at the lowest common denominator. Prices are set to a new limit, and of course, buyers are still buying. I mean, take a look. F-Series trucks are up a strong 1% rise in sales in Q2. BMW's ranked number 3 now for plug-in hybrids. Toyota US EV sales have absolutely quadrupled in Q2. And GM truck sales have literally blown the roof off with a massive 10% increase, or 267,000 vehicles up in Q2 of 2024. Clearly, sales are through the roof for many manufacturers. Why is this going on and what's happening? Who's actually to blame for this? You're not going to like to hear the whole story here, but we're going to share it anyway. The sad part is a lot of customers have been thinking, when are these car prices dropping? Cars, trucks, SUVs. Prices seem to be absolutely higher than they've ever been, and yet they're still holding on. These dealers, we're seeing it, Rams, Jeeps, we're seeing even some of the Nissans, although there's some incentives on Nissans and Kias and Hyundais, the general majority of vehicles are still holding high price tags. It's not uncommon to walk into dealer lots and find $100,000 half-ton pickup trucks. We're seeing $80,000, $70,000 trucks by Toyota. We're seeing Rams. We're seeing GM and Fords are selling these pickup trucks for 70, 80,000, even 100 grand and more. I'm seeing diesel trucks up to $120,000 plus. We're seeing Jeeps now and at ridiculous price tags of 70, 80,000 dollars, and even no-name small-scale vehicles like Kia, Hyundai, that once were bargain basement prices are now we're seeing $50,000, $60,000 for a Hyundai or a Kia. What gives? Even Hondas and Toyotas prices are rising, cars, SUVs, and trucks. Now we're seeing popularity of certain types of vehicles increasing. We know hybrids, we know EVs not so popular right now, but plug-in hybrids or hybrid electric drivetrains are very popular because it gives people range, it gives people the economy that they're looking for, but they still don't have to give up some of their goodness they get from the internal combustion engine. So there's clearly some technology that people want to get their hands on. There's great new styling, great new design. Is this in fact what's driving people down to buy these new vehicles? Is this what's causing prices to stay high? And why are they not dropping? I've been studying these numbers and these facts here for the number of months and years actually. And unfortunately we see, go back to 2020 and then 21, 22, we saw this massive spike in vehicle prices. A lot of it had to do with supply and demand. Of course, there were shortages on chips. They couldn't get a lot of the chips, the microprocessors are put in a lot of these vehicles, and sadly enough, then manufacturers realized, okay, we're not selling the volumes that we always wanted, or the volumes of vehicles that we need to stay in business and keep the lights on. But you know what? What if we sold more expensive vehicles with higher profit margins, and then we didn't have to sell as many vehicles and we ration those chips and some of those crucial parts that were hard to come by? Well, that's exactly what was starting to happen. And we see a lot of these manufacturers are starting to get on wagon and selling these premium vehicles, premium technology for relative bargain basement supply chain costs, but they're transferring it to you, the buyer, for huge money. They're claiming they're not making money. The sad reality is we're seeing obviously CEOs of almost every organization making record profits and income, 20, 30, 40 million dollars for a lot of these CEOs. A lot of their top executives are getting paid in the millions of dollars as well. We're also seeing a lot of the union workers making higher wages than they've ever made. And yet these manufacturers still continue to sell vehicles. What gives? Why are people buying these vehicles when trucks are costing $80,000, $90,000, or $100,000? Well, it's because it's a buyer's issue. Buyers are causing this problem. The dealers, the OEMs, they're going to reset their numbers. The dollars and cents that they're going to charge for each and every one of these vehicles, the tag, the MSRP, manufacturer's suggested retail price, are assigned based on popularity. And it is a very much driven by the market, what the market can bear. So if people go in there and they buy these vehicles at regardless whatever the price is, they're going to sell. And when they sell, obviously the dealers recognize that people are buying it. We can set this $50,000 benchmark. Oh, wait a minute, people are buying it. Okay, What about next year? We're going to raise prices up another 3.5%. Let's charge us $55,000 next year. And they do. And they still get people buying. And then in the year after, they go up to $62,000. Oh, sales are down, sales plummet. We hear the numbers and we hear the facts. So these dealers then start to say, okay, we've reset that benchmark. Actually, the buyers have reset that benchmark because it's the buyers who are coming in there willy-nilly, not even thinking necessarily what represents good value. They see that next shiny toy and they want that new vehicle. So, okay, so sales drop a little bit. All of a sudden, you get this manufacturer, they escalate these prices for the next year, and all of a sudden the $62,000 doesn't seem to be very appetizing to a lot of buyers. Okay, maybe we went too far. And the dealers and the OEMs, and they look at this and they say, okay, how do we get people in the door? Well, maybe what we can do is offer some incentives. Yes, that's what we'll do. They know all this profit is there because theirs is quite variable and it's all driven by the consumer. Once the consumer decides that it's adequate and they're in a place where they can A, afford it, in this case it's interest rates, or B, incentives are motivating people. And this is what's silly because a lot of people are buying based on incentives. And that's what they're called, incentives. They're incentivize the buyer to buy these vehicles. Okay, so the $62,000, now all of a sudden dealers say, oh, sale price, and they remarket it at $58,000. We've knocked $4,000 off the price of this vehicle. People get all excited and you see these big red, these signs and these bulletins and these great marketing schemes that say, hey, look, we've knocked $4,000. Wow, that's a great deal. And so what we get then is the entire benchmark has been reset. So no longer is that $50,000, 50 grand. It's now 62 grand in 2 or 3 short years because people were okay with that and they were resetting these benchmarks. And upon resetting these benchmarks, we find, okay, ratcheting effect. Okay, they're not selling, we'll incentivize. But now you've raised people's expectations. Buyers subliminally recognize that that's a $62,000 vehicle. They forget that 2 years ago it was only $50,000. But they're okay if $62,000 now is retracted by a couple of grand. People like to recognize they get great deals. Have you ever seen those online shoppers? And obviously they go on the Black Fridays and some of these big deals and these sales that pop up on those special days of the year. Did you not recognize that widget that you buy on Amazon often comes, you see it and it's on that special Black Friday or some of those big sales, and you see those sales events and that widget now is $18.50. Wow, it's on sale, $1.50 off. Hey, I've got to get that. But did you realize they hiked those prices up just before sale day and then retracted them so it displays that there's a retraction or a sale price on that part, when in fact they normally sell those parts off of those special days for $12.95. But in anticipation of sales days or those hot buyer market times, in other words, in the automotive industry, it tends to be around vacation season, summer, spring. Obviously, things settle out a little bit as we get into summer holidays. We see always this little bit of a sag. But generally in spring, we see the hot market. You know, we often seen these typical time frames during vacation holiday season. People decide to start buying as we come back to work, come back to school, come back to holidays. And there's special times that people are, buying these vehicles and they're becoming ever more popular. But why is this happening? And why are people buying? Because they're incentivized and they're buying with emotion. And so the interest rates aren't that great. Okay. So we see an interest rate on the average used car vehicle in that 6 to 7 to 8% for a brand new vehicle. Okay, well, we can mitigate that. So the manufacturers then say, look, we'll give you a 1.99% interest rate on that vehicle. Well, you just got sucked into the oblivion. Okay, so this is what happens. People go down this rabbit hole, purchase these vehicles because now they see this 1.99% and it feels so right. But did you realize that dollars are coming from somewhere? These manufacturers are now tacking that money on to the base sticker. So if you go in there with a large amount of money or basically pay cash, your cash price for that vehicle is not going to be the same price as that 1.99% price of that vehicle. That's because they're fattening up and putting some of that fluff into that vehicle's price when you take financing rates at 1.99%. If they know they can make money on financing, they will give a little bit leeway on the base price of their sticker price of that vehicle. But if they're going to sell it cash because you come in and say, I'm just going to write you a check, it's cash, all in, no financing, no leasing, they have nothing to work with. And they're going to literally charge you as much as they possibly can because they have no other place to take that money from. So they're going to charge you accordingly. And unfortunately, then the price is a little higher. So all of these are marketing gimmicks giving you charging you a higher price on the vehicle year over year over year. And very rarely do you find that ratcheting effect retracting. And the only time you're finding a deal is on incentives or financing rates, because generally these dealers are not doing anybody any favors. And the worst part is the buyers seem to forget. Back 2, 3, 4 years ago, we saw this steep escalation. Now, we know everybody was sitting at home. In 2020, we saw the wheels fall off for everything. People couldn't afford initially, but then all of a sudden, U.S., Canadian governments started to hand out money left, right, and center. They were printing money like it was going out of style, sending people checks to stay at home because they couldn't work. People were spending money frivolously. It was going out of style. Okay, lo and behold, all of a sudden, the roof flies off and people are working again. They wanted their new vehicles and everything. Life was grand. They had this money. They were going out shopping. Interest rates dropped. And of course, we saw everything was good. Interest rates were low for a while. Then interest rates spiked. This is what's happened in the last couple of years. Interest rates, and this has caused some of the repossession issues, what we're seeing right now, some of the equity issues and being underwater. But generally, people were still buying. And because people were still buying due to largely increasing, number of people getting back to work, incentives by governments giving people money, people were still buying. And these dealers were cranking prices out, openly, not putting as many of their entry-level vehicles out on the car lots. The OEMs were generally sending a lot more of the higher spec vehicles to these dealerships to sell. And that was the allocations. You had to sell those. And if you couldn't sell those, there's agreements between the dealerships and the manufacturers, and you have to sell certain vehicles. So the sales volumes, you actually have to pay floor plan costs to keep them and constant lease to keep those vehicles on the lot. So dealers are more and more motivated to move those products, and it becomes a real challenging time. But unfortunately, a lot of those vehicles are, the incentives that they get from the manufacturer are minimal in a lot of cases. They want to continue driving profits. The dealerships are struggling. Look at Stellantis. They couldn't sell very many vehicles. They were struggling and looking for help from, home base. Ram dealers couldn't get enough incentives and motivation from the manufacturers to get these vehicles sold. So people were just struggling, obviously, with buying these new vehicles because the dealers couldn't pass down the benefits to the consumer. It's consumer driven. Let's not forget that. And that's the problem. We all get this in our mind. We see these prices. We've seen over the last few years them go up 10, 20, 30. We've seen prices go up as much as 50% or more on certain vehicles in the last few years. And consumers have been okay with that. Why do I say that? Well, look, GMC pickup truck sales are up 10% in Q2 of 24. That should speak volumes. People are still buying. I can't even speak. I'm just so flustered right now because people are still buying these extremely highly priced vehicles. We've shown you on the car lots. I've shown you the prices of some of these vehicles. And with these high prices, people are still stepping up. How can you possibly justify $55,000 for a Jeep Compass? That's absolutely asinine. But this is what's happening. So my advice to consumers is enough. We've caused enough damage. And if the buyers, see, this is the problem. If 80, 90% of the buyers say it's too much money, I'm not buying, I'm good, I'm out, I'll wait it out, I'll keep fixing my old vehicle, I'll keep driving what I'm driving. If this is what's going on, that usually drives the market. But the unfortunate part is you get these vehicles that are sitting and sitting and sitting, and then the dealers are thinking, well, maybe we need to incentivize. But then, wait a minute, Some Joe Blow from the oil and gas industry comes on in. He's got a little extra money. He was on the drilling rigs for the last 3 months. Now he's got some money to blow, and he goes and buys that truck that just was about to become incentivized. Lo and behold, the dealer looks at that. Hey, little Johnny come lately bought that truck. You know what? We'll just hold steady. We'll keep the prices where they're at right now. Clearly they're selling enough. Now are they selling to everybody? No, they don't need to. They're selling the number of vehicles that they're manufacturing. Most of the vehicles are selling. And the ones that aren't, often a lot of them are going to fleets. Remember, fleets, businesses, companies are buying these up too. So a lot of these numbers that we're seeing are a little skewed, and a lot of them are purchased by fleets. Businesses need them for, their service industries or what have you, delivery industries. A lot of these vehicles are just going to businesses. And while that might seem to obviously skew, we know the retail market has been weak and it has been soft. But whatever that is, we're still seeing the vast majority of these vehicles being sold in some way, in some form. And okay, sure, we've seen some incentives here this year. 2024 has been time of the incentives. And if you were going to buy a vehicle, this arguably could be one of the better times to buy since 2020 or 21. But it's still not a great time. And we're never going to retract to a place where we actually find a reasonably priced vehicle, as long as these OEMs see that buyers are okay in paying these prices. That's right, we're paying these prices. Most people, we all know somebody that just bought a new vehicle, whether it's a new truck or SUV. We all know somebody. The majority of us recognize that these prices are simply too damn high. And so who's to blame in all of this? Well, you could go a few directions with this. We know the OEMs are built on pure greed. It's a capitalist business operation. Supply and demand. Where there's higher demand, we're going to supply it, and we're going to see what the market can bear. The dealerships are the middleman. They're going to constantly, like a vulture, they're going to constantly pick out as much profit out of this game as they possibly can. They've got to pay for the lights. They've got to pay for the staff, the cleaning staff, the free coffee in the waiting room, the lights, the lease costs, some of the fixed costs that dealerships have to incur. They have to still keep the lights on, but they have staff too. And they have to pay these floor plan costs, which we spoke of already. So they take a chunk of the pie. But the consumers have been a big part of this issue. How else do you justify paying 30 or 40 or 50% price increases in 3 or 4 years, when the only shortage that we saw really were in chips, and we're all caught up? That ship has sailed. So why haven't prices reset back to where they were in 2020? Okay. Inflation, right. Inflationary costs, when we talk 3 to 4% per year over year, is realistic. We saw a spike there in 2021-22 where the core inflation costs went up. We saw increased taxation, printing of money, all costs, cause these inflationary rises for everything, food, housing, cars. But we're still seeing these numbers grossly exceed in the automotive sector, outrun all other aspects of core inflation. That's right. Dealers, OEMs, manufacturers of cars, trucks, and SUVs have decided to add another element. It's called greedflation. They want to put another padding in there. They want to make hay when the sun shines and increase costs when they can. And again, this scales back to the point where why would car manufacturers charge more? Because they can. And buyers are okay with that. So definitely, if you need to buy a vehicle, we've talked about this in a previous video, absolutely buy it. We don't want to necessarily have to walk. You need a vehicle for work. You need a vehicle to get around. We get that. But there's also great alternatives, some late model vehicles used, older vehicles used. Let's just put it this way. Unless you're buying something that's heavily incentivized or you're buying used, you're going to be contributing to this. You're adding fuel to the proverbial fire. And this is what's causing these price increases year over year. These car manufacturers are making money hand over fist. The CEOs are making tens of millions of dollars profits every year and padding their own wallets. And yet you and I are struggling to buy a McDonald's cheeseburger. What's going on? I'd love to hear your thoughts down there. Please do drop a line, and as well as always, definitely check out that video. That's going to share a lot more light. Hope to see each and every one in the next one. We'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.